We are exhausted. We are tired from all of these wars, and we're non-interventionists. I mean, this was one of the promises.
It's up to Iran again as to if they want a war, we can have a fast war, and they will lose.
The escalating conflict between Israel and Iran is testing loyalty in one of America's most fervent political bases, MAGA. President Donald Trump has enthusiastically backed Israel's hardline response, but Trump's America First movement has long preached against new foreign wars. Will MAGA devotees support aggressive action abroad, or is a rift forming in the ranks? These questions loomed as New York Post editorial board members David Kaufman and Mark Cunningham sat down to discuss how Trump's stance is playing with his base. Will his decision to strike Iran and potentially become entangled in another forever war alienate MAGA voters who favor non-intervention?
Absolutely not. The voters are not going to be upset as long as it's working. People are upset about forever wars, U.S. ground troops being left to hang in counterinsurgencies and similar brutal, long-term, hard, deadly ground wars. And airstrikes are not going to upset any Trump supporter. This is not non-interventionism. This is not getting into quagmires. So far, there's no sign that the Iran intervention is going to involve a quagmire.
I completely agree with Mark, but what I will say is I think it's also an issue of messaging. I think it is possible. I'm not as optimistic as Mark. I think it is possible that this could extend longer than we might want, but longer than Washington might want. But part of the messaging around the resistance to intervention in Iran is this idea that, the Iranians haven't attacked the U.S. The Iranians have not declared war on the U.S. The Iranians haven't killed U.S. citizens. And that's just not true. I'm sure, Mark,
No,
problem.
they've been killing our people for decades.
Exactly. And the point is, I think it's around messaging. The Iranians might not have sent a missile from Tehran to Washington, D.C. to kill U.S. citizens, but they have sent plenty of armament support, funding, intelligence to their proxies in the Middle East, in Europe, that have absolutely resulted in the deaths of scores, if not hundreds, of U.S. citizens.
Yet prominent MAGA influencers like Tucker Carlson and Steve Bannon are publicly questioning Trump's aggressive stance towards Iran. Could these voices sway the MAGA base against Trump's actions?
There's a lot of voices who claim to speak for MAGA. Trump shut them down pretty nicely, saying, I'm the one who invented America First, whatever. I mean, people can still watch Tucker Carlson or Steve Bannon, whether or not they, quote unquote, speak for Trump. That's fine. But the idea that they have huge numbers of troops, no, they've got a lot of Twitter followers, maybe. They have people who are interested in what they have to say. That's fine. Free speech. It's a free speech world. I don't have any problem with them doing their stuff, even if it's often ridiculous.
And what's also unique about Trump is that, he so candidly has the ability to communicate with his followers, his fans, his voters directly. I mean, he will basically take his message, distill it, and put it on his social media platform and bring it directly to the people who support him. So he doesn't really, as much noise or chatter we might have from the Bannons and the Tuckers of the world. Trump is, the first president in many ways who's literally speaking to his supporters on his own platform, in his own terms, and basically all they have to do is listen to him, and he's provided them the vehicle to do so. So in a way, it doesn't really matter what Bannon or Carlson's, and of course the progressive on the other side say. Trump is speaking very successfully and very effectively to his supporters directly in their own language on his own platform.
But are there MAGA voters who feel betrayed by Trump's actions abroad? Supporters who feel this isn't what they signed up for?
I'd like to meet those particular MAGA voters. I've seen, one or two people on Twitter who are upset in that way. Rob Schneider, whatever, is freaking out over this. But that's not most MAGA voters. Most MAGA voters like the fact that Trump is strong, that he will defend America. They know Iran's our enemy. And again, this is not a quagmire. Those who are saying, I didn't vote for this, I'm like, I don't know what you thought you were going to get. Donald Trump has been so clear from start to finish, like 30, 40, 50 times during the campaign. He said, Iran cannot be allowed to go nuclear, to have nuclear weapons. And when you're Donald Trump, that means I'm not going to let it happen. Joe Biden saying that might mean, oh, well, I'm against it, but it can happen. Trump voters believe that he means what he says. That's why they're voting for him. It was very clear that he would stand up on this front. If he got us involved in a ground war in Ukraine, they'd have a right to feel like it was bait and switch. On this front, it's their own fault.
And Mark's absolutely right. I mean, Trump is doing what he said he would do. He's been in office only for a few months. We've seen the rolling back of DEI. We've seen this huge effort to trim the fat in government. All the things he promised he would do on day one, and he promised that he, unlike Biden, unlike Obama, unlike what Kamala would have done had she been president, he said he's going to contain Iran, and that's exactly what he's doing. And sure, there are those out there who might say, in their own belief that this is inconsistent with, keeping us from being in wars or disentangling us from global conflicts that we don't necessarily have a direct reason to be in. But at the same time, yes, Trump campaigned the way Trump campaigned, but, he's president now. It's time to be president. And being a president means taking very, very tough choices, very consequential choices. And really, at the end of the day, as much as Trump faces a lot of risk from potentially, the key word is potentially alienating voters, the real risk is his legacy. The person who's really taking the risk here is Trump. He's the one with the most to lose here because this is really this is uncharted waters. This is totally unprecedented. I mean, we're talking about, forgive me for being grandiose, but Bay of Pigs level stuff here. This is really a big deal. And Trump is the one in some ways who's taking the biggest risk because, as Mark also said, there is a very strong level of uncertainty here. We think what could happen, but we don't really know. Once you start a war or once you entangle yourself in global conflict, who knows how it's going to end? So on one level, I'm not necessarily the most MAGA person in the world, but on one level, I very much commend Trump for taking this role here because also it needed to be done. This is a just action. This is a legitimate action. And most importantly, this is an achievable action. President Trump hasn't thrown us into some global conflict that we can't even
thrown us into war. To the extent we were at odds with Iran, we're still long-term at odds with Iran, but we don't have to be shooting at each other. He hasn't actually started a war. It's up to Iran again as to if they want a war. We can have a fast war, and they will lose.
And that's very important. This moment that the president has brought the United States into is a moment, ripe with success. There's no reason to, which is very different than, other conflicts the U.S. might have gone into, where you could look back and say, how do they think they might possibly succeed? There's no reason to think we won't succeed here. I mean, it's every likelihood that the vast majority of Iran's nuclear capabilities have now been taken out with one hit. And I think it's really important to know that ultimately, on the grand scheme, what we really need for everybody, for Israel, for Iran, for the US, for the global economy, is for this war to end. It's this war to be over. And the only way this war can end is with US intervention.